So do you think there's anything we can do to pass that experience down? Because it's like, rather than having people, it's like reading, right? Rather than reading the original studies itself, that's why we have meta-analysis. It's a summary.
Yeah.
It's like the essence of like, it's like you've already gone through those 100 practice exams. Like, can you condense the key, I guess, teachings from the hardest questions into something that's less daunting than, like, that's more digestible than the person having to do the 100 practice exams by themselves? So do you think there's any way we can, like, so what I said, like, help condense that to make lives easier for the upcoming students?
Yeah. I mean, surely it's got to be, right?
Like surely, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, no, yeah, it makes sense. It's like, I think it would come down to compiling together a list of experiences, like just ways you've thought through questions. Because I think what's valuable is not necessarily the exact technique, but more like how you thought through the thinking process. But the reason that's hard to communicate is because it's your thinking. It's how you're thinking. It's not
right, and it's personalized.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to communicate like how you're thinking. Like that's not something we really have words in the English language for, to like describe just how your brain's working through. Like it's very hard, I guess, to communicate that. But there are certain like objective skills that you're using when you're doing that. I feel things like they all kind of boil down to like pattern recognition, like recognizing what's the trend here, and like what are 10, if I look at 10 questions, what's common, what's the common link? It might be something like they're all using like one of these 3 formulas, or it might be something more deep where it's like they're all getting you to think about momentum as a concept, or they're all getting you to think about like one specific I don't know, like idea in a book. Like maybe they're all getting you to think about a common humanity in a book, like something like that, where it's like there is a link and you've just got to, if you can find that, then right, like, if we can, I guess, find that and compile that, then that would be possible to like.
Yep. So yeah. I think that process, I think you might have been spot on, because it's about going through the questions, but rather a lot of people, what I did, at least for a period, was that I didn't go back and reflect enough. I didn't go back and work on those pattern recognition. Like once I did a question, I just hoped, okay, the best thing I did was write it down in a logbook. And towards the end, I got a little bit smarter. So I started writing down, okay, what are the common themes and techniques? So, which is what you talked about. So I think that process, at least intuitively, it feels really personalized, because, or rather it might not be. Like, I think it depends on your own experience, because this is like, if you go through 100 questions and you draw what's common about them, or like you draw what's the hardest kind of twist they added in there, and then you wrote that down, do you think that process can be replaced? Can someone else replace that effort for you? Or do you think you just have to go through that process by yourself? And the only way to speed it up is by, rather than relying on your memory itself to connect the dots, you physically go back to the questions you did and you physically investigate, okay, what are the common themes? Rather than just relying on the fact that I just hope I did it and my brain will remember.
Yeah. I think at some level you do have to go through that yourself because that's the only way those like links, because that link that someone might draw might be different for me, it might be different for you. And it's about the way you are thinking about the question when you see it. And not everyone's going to think, like, look at the same parts of it or give priority to the same like phrases in the question and the same aspects of it, which means then they're going to have a different mental picture of a question. And I think that's where it's good. This is like looking at someone else's cheat sheet or someone else's notes. It's like, yes, you can get value out of that, but that wouldn't be the best way to maximize your like your performance, is if you look at someone else's notes, because that's their very personal way of doing it. Even though it might be 80% similar to yours, that other 20% you can't ever find from someone else's notes. You have to kind of do it yourself to have those very personalized like the ways of thinking.
Right. And I
I
think
feel.
it's kind of like when a teacher goes through a hard question for you, you can understand it, they can tell you the underlying techniques, but maybe there's most of the value actually lies in you making that neural connection yourself. Maybe it's about like repeating that pattern in your brain and making sense for yourself and really carving out that pathway for yourself, which is the, let's say, problem solving ability. Do you think there's something special to just doing stuff that is hard and through that process gain some type of ability? So, for example, it's like doing multiplication where it's not memorized, but you just have that ability to calculate in your head. Do you think it's like do you get what I mean? So like if I just told you like a 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication, you kind of have to work it out in your brain. But the more you do it, the better you get. So do you think that's similar to problem solving, where if I just got you to do a really hard question, even though it has no relation to the next question at all in terms of concepts or techniques, do you think there's some part of the brain that it trains such that doing the first one will make the second part easier? Like, has that been your experience?
100%. Yeah, I think personally, I definitely like resonate with that very much. Is like if I've done question, I think it plays into not just so it's like there's multiple things you develop by doing questions which have nothing to do with the questions you're actually going to get. You develop the skill set of like, because those skills, they might, even though the question's completely different, you might be using that one specific skill which then might be useful here. That's one thing. And the other thing is confidence. I think that also can play a big role. If you're confident that you can problem solve, you'll be better at problem solving than if you think, oh, if there's a 3-mark question on the methods exam, I'll just not have no chance of doing it. Like if you're in that sort of mindset, then it's going to be obviously much harder to actually get some marks for that question compared to if you know you can solve a question that looks like that, or maybe it doesn't even look like that very much, but it's a question that's in a similar and like intellectually stimulating, intellectually challenging, at a similar level, then you have the confidence that you'll be able to solve it. And I think that helps inevitably to actually be able to then solve it.
Right. I think that's super important for people to hear, because I definitely would have needed that message back in year 11 and 12, because I think I just totally missed that fact. I was like, I just didn't understand that. Why are you doing these like hard, unrelated questions, man? Like when I watch you do all these like Olympiads, I'm just like, dude, wouldn't you be better off just doing like the VCAL exams? Right. But like what you said made sense, even though not on a totally intuitive level for me, because I don't think personally I've had enough practice in that sense. But I think it's really important and interesting for you to really recount that. And I think it's definitely something that's replicable to other people. And I think it's definitely one of the ways to build your problem solving, which I guess in conjunction to some other stuff will help you definitely maximize your VCE score. And I think there's a balance somewhere to strike between purely building your problem solving skills and actually, spending the time to work on the craft and the skill that is VCE questions. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think probably like a good way I like to think about it for myself, which kind of like it all kind of brought it all together, was treating it as a sort of like a meta game. So not just a game of like, how do I do VCE, but almost like zooming out of that, trying not to confine myself with inside the game, but rather looking at like a top down view on it, where I'm like trying to figure out what's the best way I can play this game and in general just learn and like develop skills which automatically help me play the game better as well. It's like just treating it as, instead of thinking as a student, thinking as like someone looking down on me and thinking about what can I do better, like playing just myself as a game. I don't know if this makes sense.
Right. Can I try to capture in like analogy in sports maybe? So is it, rather than focusing on, say, like basketball, rather than like shooting basketball all day and like doing those little skill things, if you work on becoming a better athlete, a better mental athlete, you can automatically, you have that base to cope with whatever is thrown at you. Would that be a fair analogy?
Yeah, I think so. And you've still got to shoot like 500 or whatever, like some number of basketballs every day. But yeah, that mental side of it and that preparation aspect helps, I think, a lot. That's what helped me, like, I think, a lot.
Yeah, I think that's where like our path really diverged in terms of like personal experience, because I don't think, even though I knew the importance of doing hard questions, I only confined it within the game of VCE. I never looked at it as the metagame that you spoke about personal learning, because back then, do you think, where does that come from? Do you think that comes from like your personal values? Like, do you value growing as a problem solver? Because I never had
Mm-hmm.
that kind of identity associated with myself in VCE. I was
Yeah.
just like, look, my identity is working hard. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think if I had to sum it down, and for me, I just applied that in the context of VC as hard as best as I could. So,
Yeah.
what was kind of like your identity that allowed you to manifest whatever value into, okay, I'm going to play the metagame instead of just confining to VC?
Yeah. I think there's two things. The one thing was, I think I have always thought of myself more as a problem solver, in the sense that if I'm put in a situation, like if I'm forced into a situation, I should have enough exposure, enough skills, enough brain power to be able to figure something for myself out of that situation. So I've always thought of like a very broader view on it. So I'll still work on those specific skills for that specific situation, but I'll always have a big picture like view in mind. But at the same time, this is something I've probably developed in the last year or so. Like I haven't had this since like year 7 when I started, like, or year 9 when I came here or whatever. Like this is something I've realized after the fact that, oh, I've been doing this already. And I guess it comes down to partly what I was exposed to just in my childhood, like just even in India and from my parents and so on. And I think in that sense, I got lucky that I like to think that I was put into this situation, and then I realized after, like I wasn't always planning to like become a better problem solver or like
Mm-hmm.
have that, but I think now I've realized that that's what I've been doing, and like I enjoy doing that, and like that's now I recognize that is something that I can keep working towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, after you've like put that conscious, I guess, a label or a summary of what you did unconsciously, would
Mm-hmm.
you say like what part of that do you enjoy? Is it just being kind of like, because I'm picturing like a superhero, like whatever situation you put him in, like it doesn't matter if it's VC, it doesn't matter if it's like whatever, engineering, anything, like he knows he has the confidence to solve just a problem, like just any complex problem, like a consultant, in a sense, like a general consultant. Is
Yeah.
that, do you think that's
Yeah.
fitting?
I think so. At some in some respects, yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
at the same time, like obviously this isn't a whole, like just this by itself can't be everything, but yeah, I think this is a big part of what I kind of want myself to have, that like what I want, one of the core skill sets I'd want to have is, yeah, like developing this problem solving and like being able to handle a situation, like whatever is thrown at me. I know I can, if I don't know the stuff already, I'll be able to research and learn it and then apply it as needed type thing.
Right. What did you what do you think was your primary motivation? So not necessarily what you
Mm,
felt in the moment, because as we've discussed, like we're probably like retrospection is like 2020, so we're probably better off summarizing from our perspective now. So like,
mm-hmm.
what do you think drove you to choose the path that you did from a, I guess
From
maybe
that, like
feeling
that
perspective,
time.
from like a value?
Mm-hmm.
So like, was it like, did you enjoy the process of working on something hard and then solving that, like, or did you just want to achieve, which I know is not true, but this is just an example of
Mm-hmm.
like achieving, maximizing the highest data so you can, whatever, your family can be proud of you, your friends can be impressed. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
drove you?
I think, okay, at some level I always drew, so at the very start, like say when exams started in I think it was year 4 actually, is when like the first exams started in our year. I think at that time I started taking like dopamine release out of getting a high mark compared to others. But probably like somewhere along the way, and this is a long term transition more than like a sudden click. Somewhere along the way I realized that like it obviously wasn't as much of a release anymore. Like you just get used to the fact almost that it, and then it's not as pleasurable a feeling of like getting the highest mark in the class. And at the same time, like just because everyone knows you're gonna get it, it's like that at that point it's like like then it's not, I don't know, it's not a special thing anymore. It's
No, I
at
understand
some
100%. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like it started off as like I started feeding off that in probably say the first 2-3 years, and this is like I was super young, like 4 5 6. So it's like I wouldn't draw much from my feelings then because I just, to be honest, I don't remember like what I felt then. But I
Right.
think one thing I remember is just like being hyped up just because I was getting the high mark. And because because of the environment over there, I feel like this might not necessarily translate here because there are no exams in like year 6 here. But I think over there, because that was the thing that everyone was doing, that everyone was working towards, and I was able to be on the top in that environment, I think that gave me like it gave me an idea of like, okay, this is something I can do and be like at a certain, I can be like a joke among friends even. I can be, I guess, celebrated, not celebrated, but like that's not the right word. But
No, I get
like,
what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, I can
Yeah,
have
and
like social standing
your
almost, or
humility
whatever
is
you want to
standing in
call
the
it.
way of your accurate descriptions.
Yeah, no,
No.
that's a yeah.
I
But I
100%
feel
get
like
that
yeah,
because
basically.
in that sense, I think I share that feeling because in China where like I got ahead in math, and after I came here, there was a period where like my dad sat me down and he was like, okay, we're going to do exams from China. Like, and then
Yeah.
I just
Oh
hated
no.
that. But then I got ahead. But because
Yeah.
of that, they're like, I got ahead in class, and that gave me the early win, which I think might be analogous to your experience. And that just like, yeah, as you said, like gave me a dopamine rush. Like, I can be good at something, I can stand out. I can like, this effort wasn't for nothing. And then I think I just got not addicted, but as you said, like it kind of attenuates, right? As you get top of the class once in grade 3, a dopamine rush, but then you do it again in grade 4. It's like whatever, it's the same bunch of people, and you do it again in grade 5. It's like you don't even care anymore. You just like laugh
Now
along
it's
with
not
your
yet.
friends. Yeah, exactly, 100% get
Yeah.
that. And then so wouldn't that kind of in a sense drive you to find a bigger stage so that you can, because okay, in my head, having read so many like athlete stories, like for example, a basketball athlete Kobe, right? So if he dominates his local league, then to get the same amount of rush, then he goes onto the world stage and then eventually NBA, whatever, right? So do you think that drive is there for you? And like, because I'm not trying to put ideas into your head, and I don't think it's 100% accurate as well, because you didn't show that level of like cutthroat competitiveness in year 12 as you would like kind of extrapolate from what we just talked about. Like if you like winning, then you would do anything to just win, right?
Yeah.
So what like kind of deviate you from that, like not logical, but like I guess obvious, simple prediction of like just maximizing your score rather than what you did, which is actually caring about being a learner, being a problem solver.
Yeah. That's where I think once that started being a more of a normal thing, like maybe after the first like 2 or 3 years, it became the norm. And so then once I got used to that, it wasn't like, yeah, I guess I looked for something new, but I think at some level there was a phase where I just became comfortable in that as well. Like I just didn't do much else. I would just like, yeah, not really participate in anything other than just like doing what I by that time had mastered or like I was good at. I was just doing that and not much else. And then probably as I kept doing that, I eventually, like, you get bored as a person. You got to have something that's giving you some that dopamine rush.
Right.
So
Like
then,
crushing John Monash cohort, it just isn't as fun. So that's why you're like,
but well, only because that's what I did in year 3, and I've already achieved the like rush from that. So it's like,
gotcha.
now it's obvious. Now it's not like a big. It is a big deal, yes, but it's not like, for me on a personal level, it's not going to give me that same satisfaction. Like I wouldn't be able to say, this is what I've achieved in year 12. Even if I was like top of John Monash, I personally wouldn't be able to get like that. Wouldn't be an achievement for me. Like I'll be able to say that, of course, but it wouldn't be.
Makes sense.
Like a huge achievement for me, I guess. It's that yeah.
Yes.
So that's probably where around probably year 7. That's like around there is when I started doing lots of these competitions. And it started off with a random one. Like you just sit an Olympiad. That's an optional Olympiad. You sit it, and then because you're already good at just maths in general at that time, for example, I did well in that Olympiad, and then I was like, oh, this is something I could do more. And so then I just kept doing lots of academic competitions. And I actually did lots of random stuff as well, like non-academic things as well.
Yeah.
I've always been doing music, so like kept that going since
Yeah, I know you play the
pretty
drums.
much,
Yeah.
yeah. I play the drums
Yeah.
right now, yeah, and also like I used to play sport. I used to play lots of golf. So like
Hmm.
I guess those are the things I started going into once like school became. That was just my standard. Like you can't go higher than like the top three ranks. There's a bit of luck involved, but after that, you can't really go higher than that. Like there's no point aiming for 100% if 90% is still better than everyone else. Do you know what I mean? Like there's
I
only
get what
so
you mean.
much.
Like it's
Yeah,
categorical. You're already in that category. So yeah.
exactly. So it's like once I was in that, I didn't like. That's the point I stopped caring whether I was rank 1 or like rank 5, because I knew I was in that category. That's what was important. That I did place importance on maintaining myself there,
Hmm.
but then because I was good enough at that, it didn't take up as much of my time anymore, and that's where I was able to do like bit of sport, bit of music, bit of like I did like Hindi poetry at some point, like just things that
That's
like are
awesome.
interesting and different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in year 12, what was like
Mhm.
your mindset? Because like it's such a contrast from like what I've experienced. So
Yeah.
what was like your goal in year 12? Like what were you looking for?
It wasn't to get like if I feel like my goal wasn't achieving. I didn't. One thing is I didn't have like a clear set goal that like something I had to surpass. It was my goal was more keeping myself busy with something that isn't school, like that isn't class, which everyone else is doing. I think that was the drive for me, like in year 11, probably throughout John Monash, was keeping my knowing that I'm doing something different, and I'm also keeping up with school, but I'm doing something different which not everyone else is doing. I think that's the main thing that I kept doing. So like one competition, and then I move on to the next, and I move on to the next. And
Why
I
do
think
you
that's
think?
where,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why do you think you placed the importance? Because under such an environment, all everyone talks about is ATI. You know, like who got a 99 point whatever, and then you get into med. So I'm
Mhm.
guessing like that external goal like of like making it to med, as you said, like wasn't a thing for you, and
Yeah.
categorically you're already like happy with like where you were, like being the top 1% in like the cohort. So did that turn kind of inwards, or rather did you turn to something else external? So like, because for me, for example, it wasn't necessarily about, because like you, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in uni, so I wasn't like I have to get into med, even though like that was kind of like a just the thing I told people, because
Hmm.
the thought I had was like, if I can get into med, I can get into anything else, right? Because
Yeah.
ATAR, yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, but the number itself wasn't so much an external measure, but rather for me it was a standard for like an internal standard for myself. So
Mm.
it was about maximizing my own efforts and maximizing like leaving no regrets behind, and knowing I became like just to have a really single-minded goal and knowing that I can give everything in myself towards that goal. That was what's
Mm.
most important. And so in that sense it sounds a bit, I'm not sure, like what would you say your kind of focus was? It internal? Was it about like, okay, I see myself successful when I'm good at different things, so I've already conquered the area of academics, now I need to go conquer sports, now I need to go conquer music? Was that what gave you joy,
Mhm.
or was it just about I need to grow as a person?
I think more of what you said second was like just knowing that I'm doing something that's gonna help me grow as a person, like just something that's gonna help me learn. Like that's just gonna just I'll learn something and I'll be happy because I learned something. And like that's where it kind of that's all I need to be
Well,
happy while I'm learning, and like keeping myself going while I'm learning. I think that's I in that sense, yeah, I feel like it's quite different with like the way you approached it versus what I
did
did
that
was.
joy come from comparing with others? Because like, where was your benchmark? Like, sure, you can learn something. Like, for example, like you can learn how to
Mhm.
use Photoshop, or you can learn how to edit
Yeah.
videos. But like, what was your standard that gave you that kind of like not
Right, I
self
see what
worth,
you
but
mean.
rather like dopamine rush? So was
Yeah,
it measuring yourself against like, am I better? Am I 1%, or am I just objectively, if I can do integration, I'm good? Like, what was that like?
I see what you mean. I think I don't think I've ever compared myself to anyone like on a personal level. I haven't got satisfaction from being better at like something than someone else. I think yeah, I don't think I've felt that. It's more been, I guess, comparing myself, but against like myself from like say like a month ago or like 6 months ago or something like that. Where it's like what I'm comparing is my my knowledge, but also my efficiency in things, or like my own how much effort I'm putting into whatever I happen to be doing. So it's like a very very self-dependent like comparison point. And so I don't know if that it would be a comparison necessarily. Like I don't sit down and kind of compare myself objectively from 3 months ago. It's more like I know every say if I check in on myself every like month, I'll know I'll be better off at doing just overall, just like I'll be a more grown person. I'll have
Right.
like
So
more mature thoughts, and like I'll be able to think at a more complex level, which there's no, I guess, yeah, there's no numerical, like there's no objective comparison point just because even 1% better, I can't tell between 1% better or 100% better just because it's against myself. So I only have like a qualitative,
mhm.
yeah,
And
comparison.
that's what gave you the most joy, just knowing that you're always moving forward.
I think so. That's always been, I wouldn't even say like the driver. It's more just like I know I can already do that. I just look for the next thing that I can do, and then I just build that. And then once I've got that, okay, now that's my new normal. I just look at the next thing I can do, and like that's now I've done that. Now that's my new normal, and just keep kind of moving, knowing that I'm always moving my normal to better. And then that
Yeah.
becomes like it kind of resets, becomes my new normal. And then I feel like in that I've never looked at someone else's normal and been like, how's my normal compared to their normal? But at some level, that's perhaps because it's never been an issue in the sense that I haven't been like at the bottom of a class where I'm forced to think about comparing because like I have to get into a course, for example,
Mhm.
or something like that.
Yeah. No. That.
Because like VCE for like it is an inherently like the ATAR is a rank. And
Mhm.
so I think yeah, that's probably like just the fact that, for example, med wasn't like it definitely. I knew I didn't want to do med or bio since like year 8. That's like the one subject I didn't like. So it's like
Right.
I knew I don't want to go into that, which meant I never needed or like I never had a very high ATAR like requirement for anything, and so that's probably also why I never had to have that as a part of my like normal. Like I have to shift my normal by this percent to be able to get to 99 point something. That was never a factor, I guess, in
Yeah, I think I
measuring
understand.
myself.
Yeah, it really clicked when you talk about like shifting your normal forward because I see that in a lot of areas in my life as well, where
Hmm.
there's no objective goal, such as like on a physical training level. Like I wasn't trying to bench press a certain number, or like I wasn't trying to
Hmm.
compete with like so and so. And it wasn't even about like, am I in the general 1%? So when you said personally of comparing, I had a question where I was like, okay, what about as a cohort? But then it made sense as you went on. So it wasn't
Hmm.
about comparing with anyone else. It was just the satisfaction of growth itself. And
Yeah.
same with like daily habits. Like for me, like it's about moving my discipline, the average of my discipline forward. Like,
Yep.
so recent example can be like waking up at 5 o'clock every day. Okay, last week I only got up 3 times. This
Yep.
week, okay, I failed another 2 times. But then like, you get more consistent as you go. So,
Hmm.
and I'm not
And if
comparing
you
that
look
to
at
anyone
like if
else.
you
Yeah.
yeah
No, go on.
yeah I was gonna just say if you zoom out to like 3 months, you would have like still moved your average by a lot. It's like yeah,
Yeah,
if
exactly.
you move on
So
like 1% every day, it becomes like just compound interest, I guess, like
right,
across everything.
100%. And I think that's a really unique mindset that you had, a perspective that you had was like you're already secure enough as a person to not place your self esteem on the ATAR itself because you knew like I've been doing this since whatever, right? I already know the
Mm.
exhilaration of being on top and I didn't have a certain like external goal that I had to meet. So therefore then it makes sense because that's such an ideal state of freedom, I would say,
Yeah.
because what truly gets me up in the morning as well, it's not always about the external goals. Like, yeah, external pressure can be really powerful, but at the same time, what really makes me happy to work towards, rather than like it being a chore, is also that those intrinsic things that you talked about. So moving
Mm.
the normal forward and becoming more disciplined, like being whatever arbitrary goal that I set for myself in training. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, did you? So did you really find year 12 enjoyable? Because I would imagine like if I had that state of mind, I would have actually like really enjoyed my time.
Yeah, 100%. I loved it. I love high school in general. Like I never got up in the morning and thought, oh, I have to go to school. Like that was never a feeling. It was always like, yeah, I'll go. Like it was a normal thing. Like I'm not saying I was like hyper excited about it every day, but it's like I never felt bad about going to school, or I never felt it was a drag or anything like
Yeah,
that.
man, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think
That's so great because like you just wish more people would have that kind of like almost equanimity. Like you're already okay with, because you have that baseline of achievement. So then you can really like liberate yourself to follow what actually excites you. And yeah, damn, that's I think that's the most inspiring part.
Well.
Yeah.
Like
let's talk about confidence.
Of course, yeah, like other than achievement, the other thing I think that was really important for me was like confidence. Because for example, like to put a number to it, I knew, for example, when I got into John Monash and like when I started understanding how the ATAR worked and everything, by the time I knew what the ATAR composed of, I could confidently say to myself, whatever happens, I'm confident I'll get a 95. Like that was like, I guess my one number to it is like, whatever happens, I know I can pull a 95. Like that's something I can do. And then it was always, after that, it was like, that'll be good enough in terms of my course. Because at that point, I like knew I didn't need a 99.95 or like 9 to get med or whatever. And so then, at that point, I was like, I had that confidence, which I think that helped me like be able to fully actively look at other things, because I was able to like, I was confident to say I'll get a 95. Like that was my, I guess, a baseline, or like whatever you want to call it. Like I had that was a hurdle I knew I could do. And so then, that gave me the freedom to then do the other.
Man, it was funny. I'm just like picturing in my head, like, you know, the pyramid of like human basic needs.
Yeah.
And like at the bottom is like food, shelter, whatever. And I was like thinking, like, you apply that to VC, like everyone's bottom is like, man, I just need to get like a certain score, and like your need is already met at the bottom. Now you can like go on to like the next
level. Exactly. I mean, but obviously, like I'm super lucky that I was able to have that because of everything that I built up to that point. And that's not something that's in everyone's control, obviously. Like you can't control how you've been schooled until you're 9 and 10. And that's something I was super lucky, I think, and super probably like super unique as well, especially here.
I think
like,
definitely
so. Many people.
For sure, because like even amongst like high achievers, like everyone pretty much, like a lot of people who like climb to like the 1 percentile is like, man, I busted my ass, which is like my story. But then it's just like so amazing and refreshing to see a different perspective, such as the one that you have, where it was just like, man, I'm already like okay with the outcome, and I happen to have the experience of like doing well no matter what. So therefore, like that sense of freedom is so enviable. Like I don't think, man, like I think that's what's truly unique, or rather, like when people look at you, like a lot of people, I guess, just see your score and they think, damn, that's like amazing. But then like when you really when I truly get to know you better, I think like the score wasn't like the greatest deal. Maybe it was that state of mind that was truly like something that I think everyone would enjoy to have, but not necessarily have the conditions or the environment to build. But having said that, though, we can try our best to, you know, try to create that for people. So how do you think, so let's just say a student who had, because I've seen similar mindsets, but rather they didn't care about the ATAR because they didn't have a specific goal, which was kind of like me, but I never said like, okay, I'll just be okay, because I had a similar estimate to you, but mine was 90. Like mine was a 95. I was like, I'll be okay. Like if I just didn't do shit, I'll get a 90. But I wasn't okay with that. And I think that's the difference. Do you think it was just purely in the sense that the gap between 95 and 90, like, you know, just like numerically, that's just like an objective difference that made the difference between our mindsets, which I don't think is that true. But
I don't think fully, definitely not.
Or do you think it was like more got to do with values? Like if I didn't place my identity on achieving so highly in VCE, I could have had a similar mindset too. And maybe that freedom is accessible to everyone else as well. Do you think that might be possible? So even if your baseline is at like 80, like if you didn't do shit, you get 80, you can still maybe forge that mindset of like, okay, I'm gonna. I guess there's so many confounding like factors to it, but
Yeah.
like maybe what's your look on that?
I think past the kind of hurdle requirement of like, are you gonna is your baseline enough to get into a course that you might want to be doing in 3 years or whatever? And like, if that's something that does happen for you, then I think it becomes a certain amount easier to access that freedom if your baseline already meets your requirements. But even if it doesn't, I think the important thing to see here is like both of us, for example, even though that was our baseline, we ended up achieving way past the baseline, right? So it's like you can have the confidence of this is my baseline, but because I'm no longer revolving around that like the ATAR, I know I can like then be confident that because I'm not longer doing that and because I'm doing like all these other things, that ATAR will probably be way higher or like a certain significant amount different to my baseline. So it's like that's also probably a consideration is
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So by doing those things that you might enjoy more and extracurricular, you naturally bring up your baseline anyways. And
yeah,
if that's enough to get you into the course, why not take that road instead of like, you know, grinding really hard
yeah.
on the score
Like why not
itself.
take the freedom path when the end result can be the same? Like yeah, kind of
Right,
is the
yeah,
extent.
that makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. Yeah, that's definitely a really refreshing mindset for people out there. But having said that though, I think you got to do something. There's no, you can't just sit on your ass
100%.
and say,
100%.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, because the thing between us two is like, we're always moving forward. That's our primary goal. If you don't have
Yeah.
that, then you can't apply this mindset to like, because if we're not working on ATAP, we're working on something else. That's for sure,
Yeah.
like guaranteed. That's just who we are.
Exactly.
But then
Exactly.
you can't just like cherry pick that mindset and say like, okay, Amitav and Kenny said it's okay just to like get into your course. I'm not gonna do shit. I'm just gonna waste my life away. Like even if you like partying, go do that, whatever.
Mhm.
But like do something meaningful. Don't just
Yeah.
like watch Netflix throw your top because like you heard like we say, okay, it's fine, just go with your baseline and still,
Mhm.
whatever, get in your course. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, the important thing is when we say freedom, like us, we mean like freedom to then be able to pursue something, not freedom to sit there and watch YouTube
Right,
on
of
Netflix.
course, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important to realize and recognize that as well.
Yeah, dude, this has been amazing. Like talking about like the big picture stuff. I think that's so valuable for people. But I think let's also discuss some like tactical things.
Mhm.
So, did you ever have a certain routine or habit that you established that really helped uh, allow you to maintain a certain level of achievement that you wanted to?
Um, yeah, I'll try to identify like I guess very specific things that I did.
Hmm.
So one probably if I was to attribute like if I was to just look at school now and just like subjects and look at habits that I had, either I developed actively or I realized after that I've had them already, but like in retrospect, I've
Yep.
always been doing this, but I realize now. I think one thing I've always done is listen to the teacher in class. And I think that's something people don't do enough, especially if they have tutors or like some other form of another avenue for learning the same subject. They'll not listen. And this is something I've talked with you about before as well. It's like
Yes, for sure. Yep.
the teacher knows how to explain the topic better than anyone else, like better than the textbook even, because it's a live, inherently like more communicative like setting. And it's like
Hmm.
that's the best place to learn if there ever was one kind of thing. And I think that's like I haven't always believed in this. Like I was told I was told this or like I understood it after someone like because for example in year 7 or like year 8 I used to be the kid that like made a mess in class, like disturbed everyone else and just like wasn't a good student in class because I had the confidence of like I've done the maths, I've
Yeah,
done this maths
yeah.
concept, I can do whatever I want, and I had like 5 other friends with me that were like they also were in the same situation, so we had like a whole group that would
Oh,
just like
okay.
mess around in class all the time, and the teacher started hating us after, and then like we started to get in trouble with just like we started getting kicked out of class basically, and I think that's when someone told me that it was it's like even if you know all the stuff in class, if you listen to the teacher for like 50 minutes, there will always be at least one thing you can take away from that class that you didn't know before. So even if you know like 45 minutes of the content, you'll still learn 5 minutes of new things that you didn't know before, a new perspective, a new way to think about something. And I think that it's sort of like, I know it's funny to think back and think, how did I like have that level of thinking in year 8? But it somehow clicked, like something from that clicked. And I was like that makes sense. Maybe I should listen in class. And obviously the fact that I was getting in trouble, like that also helped. But I think like thinking about that, something that kind of clicked, and I was like, there is always something to learn, even if you have a tutor that's teaching you the same thing again. And it applies to the tutors class as well. It's like everywhere you're going, there's always something to learn, I feel. And like, yeah, that's something. So listening in class is like one active technique that I've always done.
Right. Yeah, that's some exceptional year 8 humility right there. No, but this is I like to like challenge you a little bit on that point, just so like because I agree with the overall message for sure. Like you can always learn something, but the problem I had was, maybe you can help me with this, was that it was about efficiency. So if I learn, because like I'm the type to get ahead in class, get ahead for class in the summer holidays. So if I've already learned that content, then how should I spend my time in a way where it's more efficient? Because as you said, if I sit there for 45 minutes and all I learn is 5 minutes worth of insight, like sure, that might be valuable, but what if because in my mind, I would think like, okay, if I just sat there and did practice questions or practice exams, whatever, right? For that 45 minutes, yeah, I might have missed that 5 minutes, but at the same time, I didn't waste, quote unquote, waste. Maybe you can challenge on that part, the 45 minutes. How would you go about resolving that?
I think that's like a completely valid point. I completely agree. It's like that 45 minutes is it's not, you're not taking away anything from that. You might be repeating things that you've done before, but yeah, you're not necessarily taking away value from that. But I think that's also where it's like I guess I've always placed value, like a lot of value on that 5 minutes, like way more. So like that 5 minutes makes the 50 minutes worth for me. It's like, and the other thing is because I know that if I do practice exams in class, and this is very like just me, I don't know if this applies to everyone.
Right.
Like this is just what I felt, was if I'm doing practice exams and someone's like speaking in class, a teacher speaking, then I wouldn't be nearly as efficient doing that 50-minute practice exam. And so that's probably why I never like did a second thing, just because multitasking with like someone speaking, a teacher speaking, and doing something different isn't like, for me, it's not the efficient thing to do. So I'd rather just because if I do like, I'll probably do like 20 minutes worth of a practice exam in 50 minutes. So for me, it's like, do I get 20 minutes of practice exams out of 50 minutes? Or do I get 5 minutes of valuable learning out of 50 minutes? And
Right. So it's about just the cost benefit. It just works out for you.
Yeah.
And
I guess, yeah.
And to support your point as well, because this just came to mind, while you're going through the same concept in that 45 minutes, one challenge I faced a lot with learning myself is that I didn't stay disciplined enough to consolidate enough. I remember learning quadratics goddamn 3 times from like year 8, 9, and 10 because I kept forgetting every time. And I think there's definitely some value in listening to the teacher explain the concept again, because that's where the consolidation comes from. And maybe if you see it in a different perspective, which for sure is going to happen from you reading compared to you reading from a textbook, then you're gaining something in the 45 minutes. So that point, I think, undermines itself in that you don't waste time in listening. Like obviously there's exceptions. Like when I first came to Australia, it was like grade 3 math. Like what am I going to learn from like doing addition tables? But I think it's just the same level of humility as well. Like you might think you know something, but you're always going to gain something from listening to the teacher. So yeah, I think that's a really valuable habit. And I think to integrate that to for kids like me who like to study on their own and independently, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think like the amount of I'm like having a blank right now.
No.
But but overall I think that's a really solid habit, but except for the fact that I think you do, once you get into your own pace, I think it's a bit hard to tune in just on a like physiological level, because familiarity, you're just not as engaged. But definitely, I think. Oh yeah, the point I was gonna say was that I learned this from you during your talk, because I remember like after test I came up to you, I'm like, Amitav, how do you like? What's your approach to learning? Like, why don't you get ahead, but you're able to do so well? So you say you spend your time. So do you want to take us through this? Like, what is different with your approach? Like, why do you think listening in class to learn the content, and then what do you use your spare time for?
Yeah, so I think that's where I kind of, if I am to learn like 50 minutes of like completely new content, I know if I learn it myself, and this is again just me, like maybe for me, like it will probably be a more long-term investment, like more sustainable way of learning if I learn that for the first time from a teacher. Because even if I read it myself, maybe for the first time I'll finish it in 20 minutes. But as you said, if I have to then do it like 3 more times, then I've cumulatively, like over time, I've spent like 80 minutes on that, and I still haven't got that same intuitive, like it hasn't sunk in.
Agreed. Yes, because the teacher, you get visuals and graphics just to support. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which consolidates memory much more. Yeah. So go on.
Yeah, and I think so. Yeah, that's where I realized, like, for me, it was way more efficient to learn for the first time in class. That's why I never went ahead or like went tutor as well, because tutors usually tended to just go ahead, which was not necessarily for me. And then what I would do is I knew I'd be more efficient doing an exam by myself, because if I do it in class, I'm only doing like 20 minutes in a 50-minute lesson, just because there's like distractions. And then that's probably why a lot of my, like, I barely like group studied, as in like proper group studied, just because I knew it'd be less efficient. And all I really had left to do was doing practice in my own time, because like I'd learned the stuff in class and it was all set. And like once I learned it in class, it just sunk in, and I wouldn't forget it for like a long enough time that I wouldn't have to revise for the exam as such. So like my revision was usually just from practicing. Like maybe I'd read notes and so on if I identify, like after I identify weak points, I'd go back and read notes and so on. But the major chunk was like just pretty much fully learned just from the 50-minute class. And like the like going by the same analogy. Yeah.
So I think one anxiety that a lot of people have, which I certainly had, was that I didn't trust myself to be able to grasp the concept fully in class. And I always felt like, okay, if I went with a prescribed pace for the curriculum, because if you learn the content for the first time in class, then I feel like I'm not going to have an edge over other people, because I never perceived myself as being talented in my own definition. Like, I didn't think I could get away with putting less effort and getting more outcome. In fact, I think I was pretty mediocre. So therefore, my remedy to that was to double up, was to get ahead. And then, but then the point, I kind of contradicted myself in not listening in class, because if I truly was anxious that I wouldn't grasp the content, then I should have learned it once and then listen again in class, and then do extra consolidation. So spend that 45 minutes instead of doing practice, spend some extra 45 minutes on doing even more work on that. But
at that point, you probably cap out a bit on like time.
Yeah, especially with time. Yeah, it's not efficient. And at the same time, I think there might have been underestimation of my abilities, or rather like of the content, an overestimation of the content, where perhaps it wasn't so daunting that you couldn't just go with the curriculum, because after all, like they've been doing this for how many years? Like, it's designed so that most people can get through it. And if you believe yourself at least to be average, at least, which I think I think I'm like, if talent scale, I think I'd be on like a 6. So in that sense, I don't think I would have a problem. So yeah, I think there was some definitely like cognitive dissonance in there, and I would have probably been better off adopting. Yeah, if I had to do it again, I'd probably definitely give what you said more thought. So instead of like wasting that time in class, I could have found a way to minimize anxiety, maybe by just doing some light reading instead of learning the whole chapter, but at the same time maximizing your class time. So I think that might be a good solution for those in a similar mindset or situation with me as I was. So yeah, very valuable point. And do you have anything to add to that, or
do you think there was something at some level, an underestimation of like the teacher's teaching ability, perhaps, or like some estimation of the quality as well?
Yes, I think this definitely wasn't enough respect for the teacher's ability sometimes. Like, I think that there's like an overarching student culture to like just like clown the teachers a little bit. But in some sense, like obviously we all respected some teachers like Mr. Kerman. We knew he was top shit. So yeah, I think it's about like placing more trust in the teachers as well. I think I would agree with you on that point. In that they've been doing this for longer than you've been alive, most likely, and so yeah, they know how to get students there, and it's about placing that trust in them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that helped me is like just knowing, just trusting in the institution of like the fact that they've done it for 20 years. Knows
Which also
means that they'll be able to do it better than me at least. Like that was my thinking process.
Right, and you know what? That's so like you take that for granted, but like that takes so much humility for a teenager because most teenagers think I was part of this group. We knew better. Like, yeah, like I don't care that you've been doing this for longer than whatever, but I know what I'm doing, but you don't. So I think I feel like there's an overarching thing with you where like you just have like an exceptional humility to your understanding, especially in year 8 as well. Like the realization of like there's always something to learn from someone, and then now to like you actually trust in the teachers and the institution rather than being a dumb egotistical cynic. So I think there's definitely value. I think that served you pretty well throughout your life, maybe. Yeah. But moving on, do you think there's a aspect of organization that really helped you? Because I know you probably didn't have as much of a mental load with like, or rather anxiety with like the amount of work because obviously you've been able to handle them pretty okay. So like, was there an aspect of organization in your life?
I've kind of always worked in the there's a law called Parkinson's law, right? Which is basically so it basically says if you have like 12 hours to do an assignment, you'll take 12 hours, but if you give yourself 3 hours, then you'll do it in 3 hours. You'll somehow figure out a way to finish it in 3 hours. And I think like and this is something I've learned way after, but this is something I've always like relied upon basically is I've always done things very, very last minute. And so it's like the opposite of organization where I haven't been like I'll do 2 hours of physics today or I'll do this exam. I like personally I haven't been doing that, but the huge like exclamation thing like coming with this is this most likely probably doesn't work for most people is like leaving things to the last minute and relying on just like you'll somehow figure out a way. I don't think so. It's like a sustainable model for most people, and this is something where I've been like not many people have had this, but like around me that at least that I've seen is that they'll be able to pull through somehow like doing things very last minute. But I've realized like I've done that quite a bit during year 11, 12 especially.
Right, and I admire the self-awareness to like say it probably doesn't work for everyone else.
Because it could even be like it could be a very disastrous thing to rely upon for some people. Like
for sure. Yeah. Was there also an aspect of rather than talent, just knowing like you're able to just handle high school work? Was there also an aspect of discipline when it came time to cram? Was there a certain level of discipline where you were like, okay, I'm actually going to sit down and actually do this? I guess there's always a deadline, but also how did you hone that focus to be so sharp? And rather than saying like, I'm just going to give up, like I'm just going to like hand in a half-written work. Like, was there something else that you can help with people out there who are cramming right now?
Yeah, no, I think for me it was always if I told myself I have to do something, and then if I set my environment to make sure I can't really do much else, then I'll sort of make sure I do it. I think that's probably a habit which I haven't realized I've always been doing is things just like I'll always have a water bottle next to me. I'll keep drinking like every like I don't know every question. So it's like it's like a small thing, but it's like if I keep doing it, that's like a habit building thing where I just it becomes just like something. I don't know how to even describe it. It's just like something I just do, and then it becomes a normal thing, and it keeps me going. Like if I just get
so do you kind of leverage that rhythm to where like
the
you
rhythm,
associate
that's the word.
Okay.
Just build the rhythm while working, and also just things like not having other tabs open or like not having Messenger open and stuff like that.
Right. I think I've read that a similar thing in this book called Deep Work by Newport, where I think it was Theodore Roosevelt that he took as an example, where he said he was pretty much like you. Like the dude he had a certain level of talent, and people just didn't see him putting in that much time into school, but he was able to get everything done. And it was because of that blistering intensity that he worked with. And I think there's some link between that with like you're setting up your environment so that you can focus and be efficient. And the same thing with what he talked about in Theodore Roosevelt, where he even though he didn't, I think it was actually a chapter on Parkinson's law. So he set himself only a little window of time, but he made sure that he worked super hard and focused during that to get the task done. So yeah, in a sense, but I think maybe we can improve that model to fit the average person. Yeah. So maybe like a little bit of organization. So do you think it can ever be applied to, do you think that deadline can ever be artificial? I haven't had success in doing that, but like if you didn't have that physical deadline, but you said, you know what, instead of doing it in the last minute, I'm going to do it in like the first 3 days or something like that. I don't know. It's just a thought.
That's something I definitely tried quite a few times as well, but it worked for some very specific things, but it didn't work like on a larger scale. Like if there's an assignment that's worth like 10% of the grade, that's not happening. Like I'm not finishing that.
Yeah,
like, on that it doesn't work. But the small things such as like I remember I did this with uni physics, which was like I did uni extension, and so then I did that there was like a weekly quiz, it was a very short thing, which came out on like Monday, and then it was due the next Monday. So I was the first week I made sure I'll do it on the Monday it comes out rather than the next Monday. Yep. So then once I'd done that, and it was only like 15 minutes, but with that one I knew the day it comes out, I'll just do it on that day, because then it's just over and done with. So it's like if the task itself was something that I could finish in the immediate sitting I was in, like if I'm thinking about the task and I know if I start this now, I'll finish it before I have to get up, I'll just do it, because then it's out of my mind. But if it's a larger scale assignment, I think then
gotcha.
Parkinson's law is where it's been at for me at least. But
I've been trying to apply that in my life just in general. Parkinson's law, I actually have it. It's so funny. I came across this concept in a book I was reading this morning, so I wrote that down on the sticky note on my desktop, and then I was like, okay, give yourself 25% of time to do the stuff that you need to do. But I think in a sense it doesn't apply literally to every task, because I've realized, look, the lectures are 1 hour long. I usually do it in 2 hours. I'm not going to do it in like 50 minutes. That's not physically possible. I'm not putting it on like 2 times speed. So I think it's more about just maintaining that level of intensity when you work, because I've always had that realization of like intensity is king when it comes to studying. Because one, it minimizes the pain by shortening the duration. And two, sometimes you actually get into a flow state where it isn't as painful. Do you have any experience on that?
Yeah, no, I did. Basically, like you described it pretty well. It's like just essentially the way I'd like to think about it, it's like it was a marathon of sprints. So like there's lots of short intensity bursts, like whatever it's called. I think it's like HIIT or something. I don't know the working out term, but like basically that, but then training yourself to then be able to come back to it and like repeat it. So like getting into the rhythm of doing multiple of those high intensity like brain workouts, I guess it's like.
And I think we can all adapt that a bit better into our lives, and I think it'll probably make our lives a bit better as well. I think that sort of skill of being able to apply that to some task is like very timeless and like very not specific to VC at all. For sure. And it also, like this is mentioned across many fields, like even in athletics, they're like, focus on the thing that you're doing in this moment and give 100% effort. And that's essentially what like HIIT, that's essentially what like Parkinson's law is ultimately about. Like intensity is everything. Like if you focus, you actually create time, because instead of like giving it 80% and then dragging it on for that extended period of time, you actually can get it done and go do something else. And the quality will actually most likely be better as well. So just a win-win, but I think overall there's a high barrier of entry to that. Like it's just more mental resistance to
sure. It's definitely the harder thing to do. Like
for sure. So it goes back to like the theme of working hard versus working smart. Yes, this is working smart, but you realize goddamn, this is actually the harder part.
It's hard to
So,
work. Yeah.
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 Yeah, man.
Okay.
Look, we're actually hitting 2 hours. This thing's like a time machine. Like, yeah. Dude,
wow, I
it's
did
been-
not realize. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Should we wrap this up? And then, dude, I'd love to have you on again, man. We touched on so much stuff, and I feel like we could have kept going to like 4
I'd love
hours.
to be on again. I feel like not like it's something you can just keep talking about, and it doesn't get talked about enough. Like people
Yeah,
don't
no,
have
for
active
sure.
discussions about it, and I think it's really good you have this podcast and you're trying to bring that to more people. Like,
Yeah,
it's
man.
good.
We like bounce so many ideas off of each other. Like, I've never had these thoughts before, and then like through our conversations, like you just inspire me with all these like new ideas, and I'm able to like articulate them. And yeah, hopefully people find this stuff useful. Man, I would have like begged for people to give me this perspective in year 12, man. Like, I was so desperate. I was like, dude, I came up to you like, I was just like, dude, please just give me some advice. Like, I wanted to get better, but then like, if there was a resource out here like this where we had Amitav, but not year 12 Amitav, but like uni Amitav, more reflective, and gave you like a more summarized version, man, that'd be great. So
yeah, no, I think
man.
that's why this is like really amazing if for people listening. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, for sure. All right,
because
this is
obviously
awesome.
I didn't have these thoughts in like the start of year 12. It's like now that you
Yeah, exactly. Now it's
realize,
like more matured. Yeah.
But yeah,
All right, man. I'll probably wrap it up here, and it's been amazing. And we'll probably do this soon
Yes.
again sometime. All right,
hopefully,
man.
yeah.